Hi, everyone. Good morning. Hi, Matt. How are you?
Good morning. I'm doing all right. How are you?
I'm good. I love your hat, as always. George, good morning. How are you doing?
Doing great, doing great. It's
Great.
Thursday, and so we're
Yeah.
doing our live stream.
I love this standing energy, by the way.
That's
It's very
right. It's
good.
a little different. Change it up a little bit, right?
I love it. Guys, thank you so much for being here today. And all of our viewers, thank you for being here on the watching us today. We show up for you. We're so happy to show up for you. Um, and new viewers, just so you know a little bit about us, Valiant. We are a managed IT service provider. We are based in New York City, but we do have a national reach. And if you want to learn more about us, watch our previous episodes. I think we're on 87 now, Matt, right? Or which episode is this?
We're in the upper 80s someplace.
All right.
88, I think.
It's a lot of numbers.
It's a lot of numbers.
Yeah.
And so we've just been doing this a long time. A lot of topics covered. Feel free to look in our archives. And you can also join the conversation. Please feel free to comment on YouTube and LinkedIn. We love interacting with folks and we love answering your questions. It really makes us, this is why we do it. That is why we do these streams. So guys, today we are talking about the cloud and what the cloud is, right? I know before I joined Valiant, I just looked up and I thought, there's the cloud. No, I'm kidding. But yeah, we've spent the last few weeks talking about environments, local environments like our homes and our offices, the environment, the earth, and all the places in between. And today we're going to, again, we're talking about the cloud. So it is a computing environment almost all of us use in some form every day. And it's a term we tend to throw around. But I guess we're having this stream today to talk about what it really is, right?
Yes. I mean,
Yeah.
much like as the title said, the cloud is just someone else's data center.
Which is very powerful, actually.
It's kind of the part of this the origin of this, or why we chose this topic, is really we want to kind of debunk a little bit of the kind of this mystery around it. It's not it's not like magic, kind of the Arthur C. Clarke, things removed enough from technology, it becomes magic.
A little Arthur C. Clarke, a little Bob Ross.
Exactly, it's a tiny little trees. So and we just and it kind of break it down, like what is a cloud, why, where did it come from, and I think 3 laws, right? Any sufficient advanced technology indistinguishable from magic. That's the exact quote. Thank you, Matt, for throwing it in there. I really appreciate it because
hey, you know what? Gandalf is also Magneto.
Yes, he is.
I saw it on a T-shirt the other day, and I just had to say it out loud. But good. Absolutely though. But you see these things, and without understanding how they work behind the scenes, they do sort of seem like magic at times.
Right.
Yeah. Everything's the cloud. It's no big deal. It's in the cloud. Hey guys, just check it out. It's the cloud. It almost becomes a little too easy and too convenient to say. And I think it's nice to just kind of bring the clouds back down to the surface for just a couple seconds and kind of expose what's going on with them.
Well, much like anything else that's important to your life, the more understanding you have of it, the better you can make decisions and how to utilize it.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
If you live in a spot where electricity is pretty, we think of obviously cloud or internet has very much become a utility in our lives, much like electricity. But much like electricity, when it's out, our kind of world falls apart. So I think that's what we're seeing here. So you want to understand, how is electricity generated? How does it get to your house? How do I have redundancies for my electricity? All those sort of things I think are really important. And we're going to touch on that a little bit. But today, I think we need to talk about what exactly, Matt, use some good definitions here. What is the cloud?
Mm-hmm. Oh, did you want me to do that?
I love it. Yeah, let's do it.
What did I put as the cloud? Now you got me looking at the document. You just broke the fourth wall or whatever it is.
I want everyone to know we prepped for these. They look. It
looks like we're just geniuses spouting this knowledge off.
Right, so, and this is embarrassing because I put most of this stuff together. But yeah, cloud computing is the availability and usage of computer resources, particularly data storage and processing power. Those are the two that are really the most common. Without direct active management by the end user. It means that you don't know where things are actually happening. It's sort of like with software development, and I'm sure a lot of other areas, you've got things known as a black box. You know the inputs, you know the outputs, and you really don't care about what's going on in between there. You just care about what goes. It's the sausage machine. You don't care. You don't want to know how the sausage is made.
You just want to eat tasty sausage.
Meat in at the top, the sausage is coming out at the bottom, and that's all there is to it. Who cares about what's happening in between?
Well, I think
Exactly.
exactly. There's a layer of abstraction, right? Of like what
Right.
of what your work of you think about, and I think there's a lot of different kinds of clouds, and I think that's a really important that's sort of,
Cumulus.
cumulus nebulous.
Sorry, I'll stop making these cloud jokes. No,
No,
but
you
yes, you're
keep
right.
going. But there's so many different kinds, and I think that you have to go back a little bit in history of how we got here in the last, let's say, 50, 60 years of
Yeah.
computing environments and how they influence the design and mindset of every cloud, right?
At the end of the day, it all comes down to distributed computing. A
Right.
lot of times technology can be too expensive for any one organization to own and support. And I think that's where a lot of utility and distributed computing comes from. And when you think about it, that's very much what an MSP is as well, right? You
Right.
might not always be able to afford a full-fledged IT department that you need for your company to run. So you work with a company like Valiant that has a shared services model where our team is working with multiple customers at the same time, giving them the abilities that a large, fully fleshed out IT department would offer, but without the same overhead and same expenses.
Right.
And so it's a very common practice that you could apply to a lot of different business needs. But
100%.
the 1960s is really where a lot of that got started with time sharing,
Correct.
particularly with IBM. And I get a little nostalgic whenever I say even the name, but digital computing.
Right.
What is it? DEC?
DEC, digital, digital
Equipment Corporation.
Equipment Corporation.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
DEC.
And so that was the 60s. I mean, that's a long time ago.
Yeah.
Like parents are probably like 10, 12 years old at the time. This
Right.
stuff's going on. And by 1977, look at that. I jumped way too far in the future. Is when the cloud symbol started to come about in schematics and in diagrams. And it's the one that I think we, at least as tech folks, often, connect with, like Microsoft Visio. You look at a flow chart or a network diagram, you see that, you know something's there. It's an internet connection. It's something you may not have to be fully aware of. You just need to know there's something on one side of it and something on the other side.
Yeah, I send something this way to it. The classic goes is the in the Visio diagram, it's the lightning bolt to the turned this way, horizontal lightning bolt to the cloud, and then it's like on the other side is when you have your branch office or end users or that sort of thing. So I think so it really is. Once again, it's very much like a black box. I don't need to know what happens inside there. Much like I don't need to know how the telephone switching network works. I mean, I can conceptualize it, but I don't really need to know how I can pick up the phone and make a phone call.
I literally just found this graphic. I'm going to see if it works on screen. It's a network diagram that I built in 2002, and it's got a big old cloud in the middle of it. The organization it's for has had the network completely rebuilt. None of this information is valid anymore. I mean, it was 2002. But there you go. Internet.
There's the internet. That is my image of the internet.
Right. And you have the super powerful 3Com super stack 3s, which I think.
Yeah. I mean, if we really want to get into like nostalgia, there is a digital Priorus on here someplace. That's how long ago this is from.
Yes.
There's an Intertel phone system and everything else. And the Intertel phone systems, even then, they were beginning to take on the VoIP functionality. So there was a lot of cloud related stuff happening even back then.
Correct.
But to go back to it, we talked 1977 being where that kind of like the icon started to come from. And in 1993 is when you started seeing a whole lot more around the cloud start to kind of bubble up to larger companies, more
gelled.
Yeah, it's more mainstream companies. Apple is one for distributed computing. At the same time, there was AT&T doing a lot of work. I think the early 90s was interesting for AT&T. I think they branched out in a lot of stuff. They had their AT&T stores. Everyone had AT&T word processor
they had their own variant of Unix that was really powerful.
That's right.
It was a System 5, I think it was, if I remember correctly. So it was, they had it was a different time, right? It was like no one kind of knew how it was going to. At that moment, in 1993, it could have been possible that a Unix-based system could have been, and for Web 1.0 or first the early internet was all based on Sun and Unix systems.
Absolutely, and when you think about 1993, we were all running Windows 3.1, and that's how long ago that was.
Was that Mac OS 7 or 6?
I think System 6.
System 6, right? It was a Mac OS, but System 6, right?
Yeah. And then, of course, fast forward 6 years to 1999, and that's when Salesforce.com launched. And that was really like the first, I application as a service. That was the first instance of something having kind of like those cloud-like properties to it, being delivered to a very large audience. And I mean, I think anyone that deals with business online knows about Salesforce. So that was a big breakthrough moment.
Back then, it used to be called ASPs, application service
providers. Yeah,
and you can still almost use that term today. And it's out of favor, but
it's dated. I think personally, if I hear ASP, I'm like, okay, great, outsourced exchange. And that's like three evolutionary steps back from where we are with O365. So it is a dated term. Also, it's a programming language that like isn't really used that much anymore, at least in its classic form.
It's true.
So it really has it's stuck in the turn of the century. I think the term ASP, no matter what context it's used in, is stuck back there.
Correct.
But at the same time, things like Amazon were coming out. Amazon had EC2 and S3 come out in 2002, and that was followed by Google App Engine, which was Google's entry into the cloud in 2008. And then, of course, I think our favorite as a company, Azure's Microsoft's public cloud, and that came out in 2010.
Right. It feels like
it's 2021 right now,
and actually really close to 2022.
Yeah,
we're closer to 2022 than we are at 2020.
Oh boy, so, that is so weird.
It really it's just how far things go back. But at the end of the day, all these great cloud services and stuff that we're talking about had to physically reside somewhere. And Megan, I know you're getting there.
Oh yeah, no, I guess my question for you guys is like, because you've been in the field for so much longer than me, explain this data center thing. What is it?
Sure.
What is it? Where are they? And how does it kind of operate at this magnitude? Like making the world run at this point.
So really, if you really boil it down to a data center, it's a purpose-built space for a computing environment with the facilities to both match it's the needs of the computers versus needs of people, right? Mm-hmm. Data centers are kind of noisy, they're kind of cool and weird humidity, the environment's like not necessarily built for us.
It's like boring Tron.
Right, exactly. There's no windows. Yes, yeah, exactly. No light cycle. It's very
boring
weird.
Tron.
Yes, mixer control. But it's really just truly a purpose-built space for computing, and it kind of breaks down to like four components that, in generally speaking, you have like the actual facility, and why that's important is that the facility itself has to have really strong floors. Computing equipment weighs, and it's only gotten heavier and heavier as you cram more hard disks, more power supplies, more. It's called computing density into each cabinet. So there's a lot of that. There's a lot of the infrastructure for it. There's like there's equipment, there's servers, there's storage, there's networking. Networking in a data center is very different than networking in your office.
Iron mitigation stuff. When you walk into a data center, you see these gigantic, like 5-foot tall cylinders that are probably like 1.5 feet in diameter, and those usually filled like halon or similar gases.
Yeah, there's a newer, safer gas that doesn't kill people. But generally, I think like NX2, I think it's called.
Dude, that was like honestly like the.
Sorry, it's FE2000. But
it's like a total Skynet moment when you learn about the stuff that was in there at least years ago, and you're like, so we're surrounded we're in a room filled with machines and poisonous gas.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Let's fix Windows.
It's not for you. So there's a lot. It's all its equipment, and it's purpose built for that purpose. So, a data center switch is very different. A switch. The ISPs are different. There's a thing called point of presences, carrier grade. They're using multiple levels of redundancy. Over the years I've worked, very rarely have I ever seen a true data center go truly offline. Mm-hmm. It's, I think the only time I've ever seen it truly go offline was during Sandy and 9/11. But, ever since then, people build things differently.
But even then, it was usually like a peering issue or something that was going on where like one of the major providers was down and the others were okay. So you're like, great. So level 3 just had an interruption, but Cogent's still up and running.
Correct. Or
you'd have partial connectivity or something like that, but it would never go fully dark. I don't think I've ever experienced that. Even on 9/11, the data center I was functioning in did not go fully dark. It was scary. There was a lot going on, but it was never fully down.
Right. Correct. And then a lot of it is build the facility. Besides being like built for computers, like windows and strong floors and all that sort of thing. It has like really redundant levels of power, UPSs, generators, fuel, It's hot, cold aisle, it's cooling, proper heating, exhaust systems, ways to, mitigations for and planning around that. A lot of physical security as well. You want to know who's coming in and out of the facility. The one that always makes me chuckle when I say it is that the man trap. It's basically 2 doors or a revolving door that locks you in, and there's always different ways of doing it. But it's like, because ideally we just don't want people that are not authorized to get in there, because once again, if you have physical access to a system, basically you can own the system, as you can touch it, you can do things to it, you can physically interact with it. So you really want to lock it down. So and finally, one that I think people tend to overlook, but I think is equally, if not more important, is the actual staff that works in a data center that has to manage and maintain. I mean, one of the tasks I've just over the years watching the data center folks walking around with a infrared thermometer, just double checking the intakes and the outputs and the each aisle, making sure that equipment's not overheating, looking for hot spots in the environment, to try to mitigate that before it becomes a critical issue. And and a lot of it is a very aggressive, proactive management of the environment. So a lot of times there's like massive knocks or socks where you'll see little screens. They're kind of managing input outputs from different internet connections, the peers, the point of presences, and you're just really kind of keeping the idea is you're keeping an eye on all these things to prevent it from having an outage.
And you can never quite tell if they were monitoring the data center or a satellite in space. I mean, with the level of monitoring tools that they had in those places, that it really did look like a command center for NASA or something.
Correct. And and now obviously with some of the larger let's say big 3 or really large public cloud infrastructures, they're just taking these concepts and maximizing them to the next level. With a lot more automation, better software defined networking, better a higher level of visibility into what's happening in the environment. But honestly, the fundamentals don't change. That's the part I think that becomes, you think of Azure, you think of it as this thing that's Skynet, if you want to call it that, but reality is it's a bunch of data centers.
I love this. This is so interesting.
So here's a map of the different regions that are available for Azure, as well as some that are planned. And I mean, they're all physically tied to geography. So there you go. They're on the ground someplace and not in a skyship, like I said before.
Right. Exactly. They're not. Yeah. Exactly. They're not.
I don't know why I'm insistent on it, but I think anyone that doesn't thinks the cloud.
No, I mean, I think
skyship.
It's like we were saying, it's you use the technology, you don't think about exactly where it comes from. And I think it is good just to clarify to people, it's not a skyship as much as we would want it to be a skyship. Maybe someday, right? No.
Exactly. No, I don't know. I mean, next, well, we'll get there. I think ideally what happens, and really what it comes down to is these data centers they're very valuable real estate. They're a really important part of our kind of modern computing and honestly the data environment. If you really think about from this pandemic from a different perspective, the data centers, they no matter what, they had to stay up and running, because without them everything kind of falls down. I mean, think about this: most folks at home have a high-speed internet connection. A high-speed internet connection, actually, final mile is residing in a data center.
Right.
That's where the big switching is. That's where its peering are. That's where all the routing becomes. That's where it all happens. Your Cablevision or your Optimal Online or your AT&T Uverse, whatever it is. It's all kind of at the end of the day going right. It's all going to a data center somewhere. And there's different levels. Obviously, there's different levels of data center. Not that anyone knows, like tier 1, tier 4, and
backbone ones. There's plenty of the different types. Absolutely, but at the end of the day, they all do the same thing. They just do it at a different scale. And I think when you talk about the cloud, you could just say that the scale has been up to a very mega kind of next level, stratosphere level kind of place where they've included not just the scale, but the automations to make it to the point where people don't really have to walk into them for the most part.
Very rarely.
That's the big difference between the classic data center that you and I have worked in over the years and the ones that really comprise the cloud.
That just kind of leads me to I think our next segment, but also my next point of curiosity. Sort of, what are your individual experiences with data centers,
sure.
And New York City data centers. Even I think that's really a fascinating channel.
Well, it's interesting. You don't tend to think, kind of in your mind, data center is like this like nondescript building in some suburban office park. And generally they are. I mean, that actually makes the most sense, right? Because you don't want to put them in population centers. They make a lot, they're kind of noisy. They make massive amounts of heat. If you actually look at, like, from an environmental perspective, they're not necessarily great for an environment because you're concentrating this much power load into one space, but that being said, you still kind of need them in New York, right? We still need them in our city. Even our downtowns, because you need that point of presence. You need that what's the pop.
I mean, look, we call ourselves the city of dreams, I think, but it's more the city of memes, and we wouldn't have that without the data centers, right? So
boy,
wow, Matt.
I call that
I don't know how to take that. But yeah, I mean, and I think that what's interesting is, and what kind of people, I know myself, even at times, I'm like, why is there still data centers in New York City? Well, there's a lot of reasons. I've worked in a bunch of them over the years, and they both, all have their advantages. Some of them are like, this crap holes. Like, you'd be like, man, I can't believe this is a data center. Other ones you go to are these really, 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 really well thought out facility where someone did some unbelievable planning and preparation. So some of our favorite is, Matt, you've worked a lot in the old Globix days. I mean, over at Center Street.
Yeah, we'll show that one real quick. I mean, it's
a gorgeous building, man.
It is an interesting building to be in, especially now. I think it's like a mini mall at this point. Globix moved out probably in 2007 after they were acquired by Quality Technology Services.
Right.
But the first place I worked at, and I started in 2000, we moved a bunch of servers in here when the facility was still being built. So, like, there were sections of the data center that weren't accessible. There were people moving servers in with us. It felt like a super high-tech version of moving into your dorm room on the first day for college. Like, everyone's got their suitcases and their stuff, but in this case, it was like racks and servers and switches, and everyone's borrowing each other's tools and eating McDonald's where they shouldn't, and the whole kind of thing like that. But it was a really, really cool place to be able to spend some time working in. I mean, the nonprofit I worked at had a cabinet here and a cabinet over in their Santa Clara location where we would have a disaster recovery cabinet. And I mean, I'm just going to get full on nostalgic. Check out my ID card from the place. Look at that guy.
Look at your hair.
Very dense. Very dense.
I think we had the same length hair, actually, in that photo.
Yeah, but...
Reveal the twist.
Just to show the in-between from the Santa Clara data center.
I like that jacket, though. That's a nice jacket.
That was actually the first thing I ever bought with a paycheck from a full-time office job.
That's
I got that at JCPenney.
That's when you knew you made it.
That was it.
Exactly.
But yeah, Globix was a great data center. Both of the ones that I went to for them. And they did have that kind of modern touch. You'd walk in and there was almost like this super ornate look and this gigantic, I want to say, rotating globe. It's been so long, I may be kind of like, applying special effects in my head. But it definitely had a lot more than it needed to for the function it had. But really cool place. They had everything was great. The staff were really helpful people. I can't tell you how many times I ended up sleeping in that building while working on projects and waking up and someone being like, dude, here's a McMuffin and a coffee. Go enjoy. Like everyone helped each other, so nice. Really supportive. And it was a little sad to see the place shut down, but that's part of progression. The data center was no longer necessary.
At least in that location, right? Yeah. And obviously there's some other iconic locations in New York. I mean, the one that always struck me is 60 Hudson Street. It's like this. You go in that lobby. It's an old Western Union building. It's it's Carrier Hotel, but it's also my dad worked in there for years. He worked in technology as well back in the old days, and that place is like a temple.
There's like a subway entrance in that, it's beautiful and old fashioned.
It
was built for a different time. It's almost like how old Penn Station, or if you go to Grand Central now,
gorgeous Art Deco design to it. Yep. It was meant for other uses, and that's actually worth mentioning. The subway stuff you were saying. I think almost every data in the city is going to have a subway line going underneath it. Like Globix, they had the NR for Canal Street, and you would feel the trains coming through. You'd be on the 4th or 5th floor of the building, and you would feel the vibrations.
Sure.
That's so cool. Yeah.
but there's some other ones. There's a Pearl Street location that's a really powerful Verizon building. Everyone kind of sees that one. One I don't think we have a picture of. There's this type of thing called the AT&T Long Line building. Those are like real core infrastructure facilities. But honestly, over the years I've worked in different. And so as I said, some of these have been real nondescript places. But when you work in them, we used to run our own backup disaster recovery. They were in Jersey. Yeah. But they were a company called Cologix. We were really happy with their product and their just give a shout out. They're a great team out there, and there's just some really unique things that I remember going there and being like pretty wowed because there's this great idea of like storing fuel,
right?
And the things that I would never have thought of if I was designing these facilities. I was like, man, someone really put a lot of engineering. Yeah. And they kind of gamed it, I guess, and thought about ways that I never would have. So it was really eye opening, and it kind of raised the bar. And I think that I've never actually been to a Microsoft or a Azure, AWS, but I imagine that their facilities are probably like unbelievably well built because they have to be. I mean, the uptime and the requirements and the kind of what they're selling and what and having that kind of almost infinite level of computing power available. You have to have built it in a way that the most underlying physical things are being managed and handled. So,
right.
Really
exactly.
cool stuff.
I always imagine that one of the data centers like that would have looked like the Jamiroquai video with the moving floor.
Wow. Man, Matt, you're hitting them all today.
Guys, as the host, we're almost at 11 o'clock. This has been a really fascinating stream. And also, again, I understand a lot of this stuff since working at Valiant, but I still love hearing you guys talk about it. And I feel like I keep learning more things about, and just really, really, the cloud is just a bit, just
someone else's. It's
something we still have to build. It's still something we have to build and maintain, like anything else. Yeah.
And once again, it just not to go back. I'm sure we'll hit on this again in our future episodes next month. And cybersecurity is the idea that just because it's in the cloud does not absolve you of the responsibility for what happens in it. You're still responsible for your data. You're still responsible for your end users and your staff you support. All those things. So
we'll definitely do an overview of our responsibility model for cloud services. It's in a previous episode, but it'd be a good time to give it a bit of a refresh and go through
exactly. Maybe we could, it's called the shared responsibility model. So it's and I think it's really important that people acknowledge the fact that just because it's in Google or Azure doesn't mean you don't do anything with it. I don't think about it. I think that's a real mistake, and I think that might be it may contribute to our current cybersecurity kind of crisis.
It's almost, I think it gives some people license to put their heads in the sand, and that's what needs to be explained. Is it's not there for that, and when you do that, you're opening yourself up for a ton of liabilities and loss. And I think that you just decided one of our entire episodes that we'll do next month will just be about responsibility models around cloud services.
That would be great.
It's a really important topic, and I think one that gets overlooked, especially by people who don't necessarily support it directly. I think if you have to support it, and the thing is the fundamental. And once again, I always say this, and I feel like a broken record, but the fundamentals don't change, right? There's a reason why things are done a certain way. You may change how you do it, but you don't change what you're doing per se or why you're doing it. So it's really important. So
yes, and I think like you guys are saying, the shared responsibility model. I just think it's a gap that a lot of people have, and it needs to be addressed. It's this personal responsibility with this tool, this amazing tool we all have.
What we're going to do for next month? We're going to do an episode about the responsibility models and other kind of like gotchas, maybe. Considerations, things you may not be thinking about. Just like George was talking about walking into the data center and seeing all these techniques that they use to maintain uptime. Let's put together an episode that kind of makes people think in the same way with regards to the usage of cloud services. I know that next week I wanted to have the folks from Titan HQ come on to talk about DNS filtering, but that's security. So let's look next month. We'll make that an episode next month, and next week let's just do a little bit more on the environment side with I want to yell extreme so hard, but I won't do it. But like extreme computing environments. Let's
Yeah.
talk about how computing systems work in space. Let's talk about how they work underwater with some of the data center stuff that goes on. Let's have a little fun with it.
It's exciting.
You're going to the far extremes. I just want to talk about having to work in a warehouse where the temperature variation could be 100 degrees either way.
How do my ice cream sandwiches stay perfect all the time in the supermarket?
Right.
Well, no, that doesn't work.
That doesn't work that way. But we'll talk about some extreme computing environments and things that we've worked on over the years. I think this places I know Justin has some great. He's worked on so many interesting projects. So be it just interesting projects that would show you like how far it has to go and how we have to really think about how we protect and manage these systems wherever they may be.
Yeah, don't take them for granted. I think that's kind of the underlying thing. All right, so please tune in next week. I'm so excited to be part of that stream and to watch it. And guys, if you enjoyed today's stream, hit that thumbs up button. And if you have any questions or topics you want to see us cover or you want to see us discuss with our expertise, send us a message or fill out an online question form. Go to thevaliantway.com for all those. Thank you, Matt. And then please subscribe to our YouTube channel and to keep up with our live streams and other content produced by us. And again, thank you, Matt. Thank you, George. This has been so fun, as always. Yeah.
See y'all next week. Thank you. Have a great week.
Bye, guys.